The smell of burnt toast filled Ryan Mitchell's kitchen at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in January, mixing with the aroma of too strong coffee and the faint lavender scent that still lingered on Emma's favorite dish towel hanging by the sink. Ryan scraped the blackened edges off 2 pieces of bread while his 6-year-old daughter Sophie sat at their small kitchen table, methodically eating cereal and reading aloud from a book about dinosaurs, her brown hair still messy from sleep. "Did you know, Daddy, that some dinosaurs were actually really small? Like chicken-sized?" Sophie looked up from her book with the kind of serious expression that meant she was about to share very important information. "Really?" Ryan set the rescued toast on her plate, alongside the scrambled eggs that had turned out better than usual. "Tell me more about the chicken dinosaurs. They were called Compsognathus, and they probably ate insects and small lizards." Sophie took a careful bite of toast, thinking, "I think if I had a pet dinosaur, I'd want one of those instead of a big scary one. That's very practical of you, sweetheart." Ryan sat down across from her with his own plate and coffee, mentally calculating how much time they had before the school bus arrived. The kitchen was small, cramped really, but it was theirs. The morning light streaming through the window overlooking their postage stamp backyard made everything look warmer than it actually was. He watched Sophie eat and tried not to think about the stack of bills on his desk upstairs, or the fact that he'd been living off credit cards for the past 2 months. The mortgage payment was 3 weeks late. Emma's medical bills from her final months were still arriving sporadically like cruel reminders, and his salary from teaching woodworking at Salem Community College barely covered utilities and groceries. But Sophie didn't need to know any of that. Sophie needed to believe the world was safe and stable, that her daddy had everything under control, that losing her mother 3 years ago hadn't broken their little family beyond repair. Daddy Sophie's voice pulled him back to the present. "Yes, sweetheart. Are we poor?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Ryan set down his coffee cup carefully, buying himself a moment to think. Sophie was 6, but she was observant. She'd noticed that they never went out to eat anymore, that he'd been fixing everything himself, instead of calling repair people, that her birthday party last month had been just the 2 of them, and a homemade cake, instead of the elaborate affairs some of her classmates had. "Why do you ask, honey?" "Because Emma Rodriguez's mom said her family might be poor because her daddy lost his job, and I was wondering if that's what happened to us too." Sophie's matter-of-fact tone made the question even more heartbreaking. Ryan reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "We have everything we need, Sophie. We have our house, we have food, we have each other. Some months are tighter than others, but we're okay." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. They had their house for now, but if he couldn't figure out a way to bring in more money soon, that might not be true for much longer. "Okay," Sophie said, satisfied with his answer in the way that only children could be. "Can you put a note in my lunchbox today? I like when you draw the little dinosaurs." "Of course I can." After Sophie left for school on the bright yellow bus that picked her up at the corner, Ryan sat alone in his quiet kitchen and forced himself to look at their financial reality. He spread the bills across the kitchen table like a depressing card game calculator in hand, trying to find a way to make the numbers work that he hadn't tried a dozen times before. The mortgage was $1,847 a month. His take-home pay from the college was roughly $3,200. Add utilities, groceries, gas. Sophie's after-school care health insurance, and the minimum payments on Emma's medical debt, and they were short by about $800 every month. He'd been covering the gap with credit cards, but those were nearly maxed out now. Ryan stared at the numbers until his eyes burned, then picked up his phone and scrolled through real estate listings, looking for something smaller, cheaper, somewhere they could afford. But even modest apartments in Salem were running £1,200, $1,500 a month, and moving costs would eat up what little savings they had left. There had to be another way. He looked around the kitchen, mentally cataloguing the house Emma had loved so much. 3 bedrooms upstairs, 1 bathroom, a living room. That doubled as Sophie's play area, his workshop in the garage, and Emma's old craft room that he hadn't touched since she died. It was full of her art supplies, her sewing machine, bolts of fabric in cheerful prints, half-finished projects that would never be completed. Emma's craft room, 12 feet by 10 feet of space that was just sitting there, preserving grief like a museum exhibit. Ryan walked upstairs and stood in the doorway of the room, his hand on the doorframe. Emma's presence was still strong here in the carefully organized supplies and the natural light that had drawn her to this room in the first place. She'd spent hours here while Sophie napped, creating beautiful things, with her hands filling their home with handmade curtains and quilts, and the kind of thoughtful touches that made a house feel alive. But Emma was gone, and Sophie needed stability more than he needed a shrine. Ryan pulled out his phone and started drafting a Craigslist ad. Room for rent in quiet Salem neighborhood. $800 month includes utilities. Private entrance through side door. Shared kitchen and bathroom. Perfect for student or young professional. Available immediately. He stared at the ad for a long moment before hitting post. $800 would solve their immediate problems and buy him time to figure out a long-term solution. It meant sharing their home with a stranger, giving up some of their privacy. But it also meant keeping the house Sophie had been born in, the only home she'd ever known. Sometimes being a good father meant making the practical choice instead of the sentimental one. The ad went live at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. By 6 p.m. Ryan had received 37 responses. Most of them were exactly what he'd expected college students looking for: cheap housing, young professionals priced out of the Portland market, a few people whose messages contained enough grammatical errors to make him nervous about their ability to pay rent consistently. But 3 responses stood out as possibilities. A nursing student at the local hospital who seemed mature and responsible. A woman in her 30s who worked remotely and promised to be quiet and clean. And twins Claire and Maya Cross, both 22 graduate students at University of Oregon, who were looking for housing closer to their research positions. Ryan was intrigued by the twins' application. Their email was well written, they'd provided references, and they'd attached a formal rental application that was more thorough than anything he'd requested. Plus, having 2 people meant twice the likelihood of consistent rent payments. He called their number from his workshop, while Sophie did homework in the living room, surrounded by her math worksheets and the comfortable chaos of a 6-year-old's after-school routine. Hello. The voice that answered was young female and carefully controlled. Hi, this is Ryan Mitchell. You emailed about the room for rent. Oh yes, thank you for calling back so quickly. This is Claire Cross. My sister Maya and I are very interested in the room. Claire's voice was educated, polite, but there was something underneath it that Ryan couldn't quite identify. Tension, maybe? Or desperation being carefully managed. Can you tell me a little about your situation? Ryan asked. Are you both students? Yes, we're finishing our undergraduate degrees at University of Oregon, and we've both been accepted to graduate programs here in Salem. We're looking for somewhere quiet to live while we transition between schools. That sounds great. Do you have any questions about the house or the arrangement? There was a pause, then Claire said, When would it be possible to see the room? We're hoping to move somewhere as soon as possible. Again, that careful control over something urgent underneath. You could come by this evening if you'd like, Ryan offered. Say around 7. My daughter goes to bed at 8, so it would need to be before then. That would be perfect. Thank you. We'll be there at 7 exactly. After he hung up, Ryan felt a mixture of hope and nervousness. The twins sounded responsible, mature, exactly the kind of tenants who would pay rent on time and not throw parties or leave dishes in the sink. But there was something about Claire's voice that nagged at him, a quality he recognized from his own conversations with bill collectors and insurance companies. the sound of someone trying very hard to keep their life from falling apart. At 6:45, Ryan was upstairs in Emma's craft room, boxing up the most personal items and trying to make the space look like a bedroom instead of a memorial. He'd moved Emma's sewing machine to the garage and packed away the half-finished quilts, but he'd left some of the cheerful fabric and the bulletin board covered with photos of Sophie's artwork. It still felt like Emma's room, but now it felt like Emma's room that could belong to someone else too. Sophie was in her pajamas, brushing her teeth with the thoroughness of a child who knew she was being watched, when the doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Ryan opened the front door to find two young women standing on his porch, both wearing jeans and sweaters, both carrying messenger bags, both looking nervous and hopeful in equal measure. They were clearly twins, but not identical. Claire was slightly taller, with longer blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Maya was shorter, with the same blonde hair cut in a bob that framed her face. Both had green eyes and the kind of careful posture that suggested good breeding or expensive schools. Mr. Mitchell. I'm Claire, and this is my sister Maya. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us on such short notice. Of course, come in. Ryan stepped aside to let them enter, noting that they moved with the synchronized awareness of people who'd been together their entire lives. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs in her dinosaur pajamas, drawn by the sound of new voices, despite having been told to stay in her room. Daddy, who are the ladies? Sophie, come down and meet Claire and Maya. They might be coming to live in Mummy's craft room. Sophie descended the stairs with the fearless curiosity of a 6-year-old, studying their visitors with frank interest. Are you sisters? She asked without preamble. We are, Maya said, kneeling down to Sophie's eye level. We're twins, actually. We do everything together. That's nice. I always wanted a sister. Do you like dinosaurs? I love dinosaurs, Claire said seriously. What's your favorite kind, Triceratops? Because they have really good protection with their head shields, and they eat plants, so they're not scary to other dinosaurs. Ryan watched this exchange with growing warmth. Both young women were engaging with Sophie naturally, without the awkward adult speaking-to-child voice that some people used. They seemed genuinely interested in her answers, not just polite. Sophie, it's time for bed, Ryan said gently. Say goodnight to our guests? Good night, Claire. Good night, Maya. Sophie hugged each of them with the casual affection of a child who'd decided they were safe. I hope you like the room and decide to live here. After Sophie thundered back upstairs, Ryan led Claire and Maya to the craft room. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting them take in the space. The room was small, but bright, with 2 windows overlooking the backyard and built-in shelving along one wall. Ryan had managed to clear most of Emma's craft supplies, leaving behind only the cheerful yellow walls and the sense of creative possibility that seemed to linger in the air. It's beautiful, Claire said softly, walking to the window. The natural light is amazing. Are those fruit trees in the backyard? Maya asked, peering through the glass. Apple and cherry, Ryan confirmed. Emma planted them when we first moved in. They're gorgeous in the spring. Both twins went very still at the mention of Emma, and Ryan realized he'd spoken about his late wife without the careful euphemisms most people expected. My wife died 3 years ago, he said simply. This was her space for art projects and sewing. I've been keeping it empty, but Sophie and I need a roommate to help with expenses. I'm so sorry for your loss, Claire said, and there was genuine empathy in her voice, not just politeness. She loved this room, Ryan continued. I think she'd be happy knowing someone was creating things in it again. What did she create? Maya asked. Quilts mostly, clothes for Sophie. Beautiful things. Ryan gestured toward the remaining fabric samples. She said making something useful with your hands was a kind of prayer. Claire and Maya exchanged a look that Ryan couldn't interpret, some silent communication that left Maya nodding slightly and Claire taking a deeper breath. Mitchell, Claire said we should be upfront with you about our situation. We're not just looking for housing. We're looking for somewhere safe to stay while we figure out our next steps. Ryan waited, sensing there was more to the story. We've been living in our car for the past 2 weeks, Maya said quietly. We had a falling out with our family and we needed to leave our previous living situation very quickly. Ryan studied their faces, noting the careful way they held themselves, the expensive-looking messenger bags, the fact that their clothes were wrinkled but high quality. These weren't typical homeless college students. Are you safe? He asked directly. Are you running from someone dangerous? Not dangerous exactly, Claire said, but controlling. We needed to make some choices about our lives that our family didn't approve of, and staying meant giving up any chance at independence. Ryan thought about Sophie upstairs, about his responsibility to keep her safe, but also about the careful desperation he'd heard in Claire's voice on the phone, the way both twins had lit up when Sophie hugged them goodnight. Can you pay the rent? He asked. Yes, Maya said immediately. We both have part-time jobs and we're very careful with money. We can pay first month's rent plus deposit tonight if you'll let us stay. Tonight? If that's possible, Claire said. We've been staying in our car in different places around town, but it's getting harder to find safe places to park overnight. Ryan made a decision that surprised him. You don't have to stay in your car tonight. You can move in now if you want. We'll work out the paperwork tomorrow. Both twins stared at him, like he'd offered them something impossible. Really, Maya whispered. Really? Ryan found himself smiling. Sophie's right. This house could use some sisters in it. An hour later, Claire and Maya were carrying their belongings up the front steps of their new home. They didn't have much. 2 suitcases each, laptops, a box of textbooks, and a small cooler that apparently contained all their food. Ryan helped them bring everything inside, noting that despite their claims of financial hardship, their luggage was expensive leather and their laptops were top of the line. Whatever family situation they'd fled from, it hadn't been poverty. The bathroom is shared, but Sophie's usually in bed by 8:30, so mornings and evenings should be fine. Ryan explained as he showed them around. Kitchen privileges are included in the rent. I do most of the cooking, but you're welcome to use anything you need. This is incredibly generous, Claire said. We can't thank you enough. I've been where you are, Ryan said simply. Not the exact same situation, but I know what it's like to need someone to take a chance on you. That night, after Claire and Maya had settled into their new room and the house had grown quiet, Ryan lay in his bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people moving around upstairs. Soft footsteps, muffled voices, the occasional creak of floorboards that he'd stopped noticing when it was just him and Sophie. For the first time in months, he felt something that might have been hope. $800 would keep them afloat. Sophie seemed delighted with their new house guests, and maybe, just maybe, having other people around would make the house feel less like a museum of their former life and more like a home where new life was possible. In the room that had been Emma's craft room, Claire and Maya lay on the air mattresses they'd bought that afternoon, sharing the space with a careful politeness that would fade as they grew comfortable. I can't believe he said yes, Maya whispered. I was sure he'd want references and background checks and all the things we can't provide. He's kind, Claire whispered back. Did you see how he talked to Sophie? How she wasn't afraid of us because he made us feel welcome. Do you think we can actually stay here? Maya asked. Long enough to finish school and figure out what comes next. Claire thought about Ryan's easy acceptance, about Sophie's immediate hugs, about the apple trees in the backyard that would bloom in the spring. For the first time in 2 weeks of sleeping in their car and wondering what would happen next, she felt something like safety. I think maybe we can, she said softly. I think maybe this is exactly where we're supposed to be. 6 weeks passed in a rhythm of careful politeness and growing familiarity. Claire and Maya proved to be ideal housemates, quiet, clean, helpful without being intrusive. They took turns making breakfast for everyone, helped Sophie with her homework, and gradually became part of the household's daily routines. Claire had thrown herself into her research project on childhood psychology with an intensity that suggested she was trying to outrun something. She worked long hours at the university library and came home exhausted but determined. Maya balanced her fine arts coursework with a part-time job at a local gallery, her artistic eye evident in the small ways she'd begun brightening their shared spaces with flowers from the grocery store and drawings she'd leave for Sophie to find. Ryan found himself looking forward to coming home from work, knowing the house would be warm with other people's presence instead of echoing with the hollow quiet of grief. Sophie had blossomed under the twins' attention, chattering endlessly about her new big sisters and the art projects Maya helped her with, and the bedtime stories Claire told better than anyone except Daddy. It was working. Better than Ryan had dared hope. But he was beginning to notice things that didn't quite add up. The twins' car was a late-model Honda Civic, reliable but modest. However, their clothes, when Ryan paid attention, were clearly expensive. Their laptops were top of the line. Claire carried a handbag that looked like it cost more than Ryan made in a month, though she seemed to try to hide it under casual jackets. They paid rent in cash, always exactly on time, always with crisp new bills that suggested they'd come from a bank rather than employment paychecks. And sometimes late at night, when they thought everyone was asleep, Ryan could hear them talking in their room with an urgency that suggested they were working through complicated problems. But they were good tenants, and Sophie adored them, so Ryan kept his questions to himself. Everyone had a right to their privacy, and whatever the twins were running from was clearly in the past. That changed on a Thursday morning in early March, when Ryan's neighbor Mrs. Henderson knocked on his door at 7:30 a.m. with a concerned expression and a folded newspaper in her hand. "Ryan, I think you need to see this," she said, without preamble, pushing past him into the house. Mrs. Henderson was 73 years old and had lived on Maple Street longer than anyone else. She considered herself the neighborhood's unofficial guardian, which mostly meant she knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing opinions on how that business should be conducted. See what Ryan asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. Mrs. Henderson unfolded the newspaper to reveal the business section of The Oregonian. At the top of the page was a large photograph accompanying an article titled, "Cross Industries Heiresses Still Missing After 3 Months." The photograph showed 2 young women in elegant evening wear at what appeared to be a charity gala. They were standing beside an older woman with sharp features and calculating eyes, all 3 of them smiling for the camera with the practiced ease of people accustomed to public attention. The young women in the photograph were unmistakably Claire and Maya Cross. Ryan sank into his kitchen chair, staring at the newspaper. The article described how Claire and Maya Cross, daughters of billionaire tech entrepreneur Victoria Cross, had disappeared in December after Claire's engagement to a prominent business executive had been announced. Their mother was offering a substantial reward for any information leading to their safe return. "Your houseguests, Mrs." Henderson said with satisfaction, "are worth about $400 million each, according to this article. And their mother is very, very worried about them." Ryan read the article twice, trying to reconcile the image of the wealthy socialites in evening gowns with Claire and Maya, who'd been eating cereal in his kitchen an hour ago while helping Sophie practice spelling words. "Have you told anyone else about this?" Ryan asked. "Not yet," Mrs. Henderson said, though her tone suggested that could change quickly. "But Ryan, you need to think about Sophie. These girls are clearly running from something, and their mother has the resources to find them eventually. Do you want to get caught in the middle of whatever family drama drove them away?" Before Ryan could respond, the sound of footsteps on the stairs announced that Claire and Maya were coming down for breakfast. They appeared in the kitchen doorway, both in jeans and sweaters, both carrying the messenger bags they used for school, both stopping short when they saw Mrs. Henderson and the newspaper spread across the kitchen table. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. "Well," Mrs. Henderson said finally, "I suppose this explains why you can afford to pay rent in cash." Claire's face had gone completely white. Maya grabbed her sister's hand, and Ryan could see them both calculating distance to the door escape routes, how quickly they could pack their few belongings and disappear again. "Mrs. Henderson," Ryan said carefully, "I think you should leave now. I'm just saying you have a responsibility to that little girl upstairs. These two aren't who they pretended to be." "No one is exactly who they pretend to be," Ryan said, standing up. "Everyone has things they're running from. The question is whether they're running toward something better or just running away from consequences they deserve." He looked at Claire and Maya, both of whom were still frozen in the doorway. "Mrs. Henderson, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll handle it from here." After the older woman left with a dissatisfied huff and multiple warnings about making sure Sophie was safe, Ryan folded the newspaper and set it aside. Claire and Maya hadn't moved, both of them, staring at him with expressions he couldn't read. "Sophie's at school," Ryan said quietly. "We have about 6 hours to figure this out before she gets home. Do you want to tell me the truth, or do you want to pack your bags and disappear before I call your mother?" "Please don't call our mother," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then sit down and help me understand what's really going on." They sat across from each other at Ryan's kitchen table, the newspaper between them like evidence in a trial. Claire and Maya held hands, drawing strength from each other in a way that reminded Ryan painfully of how he and Emma used to face difficult conversations. "The article is mostly true," Claire said slowly. "We are Victoria Cross's daughters. We did disappear in December. But the reasons aren't what the newspaper suggests. What are the reasons Maya spoke for the first time since seeing the paper? Our mother arranged an engagement for Claire without telling her, to a man 40 years old who sees marriage as a business merger and women as assets to be managed." Claire continued the story. "I found out about the engagement at a board meeting. Mother announced it like it was any other corporate acquisition. The wedding was already being planned. Contracts had been signed. I was expected to go along with it because it would be beneficial for the family business." "You refused?" Ryan guessed. "I refused, and Mother froze our access to everything. Bank accounts, credit cards. Our apartment lease was cancelled. Our college tuition payments were suspended. She said if we wanted to live independently, we could learn what independence actually costs." "How have you been paying rent?" Ryan asked, though he thought he might already know the answer. "We had some cash savings," Maya said. "Emergency money we'd kept separate from the family accounts. It won't last much longer." Ryan studied their faces, looking for deception, for the entitled carelessness he'd expect from billionaire heiresses playing at being poor. But all he saw was exhaustion, determination, and the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from carrying burdens too heavy for their young shoulders. "Why didn't you just go to your father?" "Our father died when we were 12, Claire said softly. "It's been just us and Mother ever since. And Mother loves us, but she loves control more. She's terrified of losing us the way she lost him, so she tries to manage every detail of our lives to keep us safe. And you decided that safety wasn't worth the price she was asking. We decided that a life without choices isn't really a life," Maya said. "We'd rather struggle and be free than be comfortable and controlled." Ryan thought about Sophie upstairs, about his responsibility to protect her, about the complexity of harbor fugitive heiresses in his home. But he also thought about the way Claire helped Sophie with her homework every evening, the way Maya had taught his daughter to see colors in everything around her, the way both twins had brought laughter and warmth back into a house that had been too quiet for too long. "Are you in any physical danger?" Ryan asked. "From this man your mother wants you to marry, or from anyone else?" "No," Claire said immediately. "Preston is controlling and dismissive, but he's not violent. This is about control, not safety. And if your mother finds you, what happens? She tries to convince us to come home, probably with a combination of guilt, financial pressure, and promises to negotiate better terms for the engagement. Will you go? Claire and Maya exchanged the kind of look that passed between twins who'd been having conversations without words their entire lives. We don't want to, Claire said finally. But if she cuts off our ability to finish school, if she makes it impossible for us to support ourselves, we might not have a choice. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, weighing options, thinking about Emma, and what she would have done in this situation. Emma had always believed that everyone deserved a chance to choose their own happiness, even when those choices were difficult or complicated. Here's what we're going to do, Ryan said finally. You're going to stay. You're going to finish this semester and prove that you can support yourselves without your mother's money. And I'm going to help you figure out how to do that without compromising Sophie's safety or my responsibility to her. Why? Maya asked. Why would you take that risk for us? Because Sophie thinks you're her big sisters, and I'm not going to be the one to break her heart by sending you away unless I absolutely have to. He paused, then added more softly, and because I know what it's like to love someone enough to make choices that other people think are mistakes. Thank you, Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for not giving up on us. I'm not giving up on you, Ryan said. But I need you to promise me complete honesty from now on. No more secrets. No more pretending. If we're going to make this work, it has to be based on trust. No more secrets, Maya agreed. And if your mother shows up, we handle it together, as a family, because that's what we are now, whether the rest of the world understands it or not. That evening, after Sophie had been told a carefully edited version of the truth about their house guests' unusual circumstances, the four of them sat in Ryan's living room, planning how to navigate the next few months. You'll graduate in May, Ryan said, looking at the twins' academic timeline. Can you both get into graduate programs here in Salem? Already accepted? Claire said. Master's program in clinical psychology. I want to work with children who've experienced trauma. Art education. Masters. Maya added. I want to teach art in public schools, help kids use creativity to express things they can't put into words. Ryan felt a surge of admiration for both young women. Despite everything they'd been through, they were still focused on helping others, on building careers based on service rather than just escape. Student loans for graduate school, he asked. We can apply, but without family financial information. It's complicated, Claire said, and our mother could interfere with any aid applications if she wanted to. Then we figure out other options. Ryan was already thinking through possibilities. I know people at the community college connections in the education field. There are ways to make this work. Sophie, who'd been quietly absorbing the conversation, suddenly spoke up. Are Claire and Maya going to stay forever? All three adults looked at her, surprised by the directness of the question. Do you want them to stay forever? Ryan asked gently. Yes, Sophie said, without hesitation. They make our family better, and they help you be happier. Daddy, the simple honesty of a 6-year-old cut through all the complicated adult worries about money and family dynamics and uncertain futures. We want to stay, Claire said softly, looking at Sophie. If your daddy will let us, and if we can figure out how to make it work. Then we'll figure it out, Ryan said, together. That night, as Ryan lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of Claire and Maya moving around in Emma's old craft room, he thought about the strange turns life could take. 6 weeks ago, he'd been desperately trying to avoid losing the house. Now he was harboring runaway heiresses and feeling more hopeful about the future than he had since Emma died. Sometimes the best decisions were the ones that looked impossible on paper but felt right in every other way. Sometimes family wasn't about blood or tradition or meeting other people's expectations. Sometimes family was just about choosing to show up for each other day after day, even when it was complicated. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the people who needed you most were exactly the people you needed too. Spring arrived in Oregon with the dramatic flair it always brought to the Pacific Northwest, transforming the gray landscape into an explosion of color that made Ryan's backyard look like something from a fairy tale. Emma's apple and cherry trees bloomed in clouds of white and pink petals that drifted across the yard like snow when the wind picked up. Claire and Maya had been living on Maple Street for 3 months now, and the careful politeness of their early weeks had evolved into something that felt surprisingly like actual family. They had established routines that worked around each other's schedules, shared responsibilities without formal agreements, developed the comfortable shorthand of people who had learned each other's rhythms. Claire made coffee every morning before anyone else was awake, standing at the kitchen window in her pajamas and watching the sunrise while the house slowly came to life around her. Maya cooked dinner 3 nights a week, experimenting with recipes she found online and turning their modest grocery budget into surprisingly interesting meals that Sophie actually ate without complaint. Ryan found himself looking forward to coming home from work in a way he hadn't since Emma died. The house felt alive again, filled with conversation and laughter and the pleasant chaos of people who enjoyed each other's company. Sophie had blossomed under the twins' attention. Her math grades had improved dramatically with Claire's patient help, and Maya's artistic influence had turned their refrigerator into a rotating gallery of increasingly sophisticated drawings. More importantly, Sophie seemed to have regained the confident happiness that had dimmed after her mother's death, the sense of being thoroughly loved and completely safe that every 6-year-old deserved. On a Saturday morning in early April, Ryan woke to the sound of laughter from downstairs and the smell of something more ambitious than usual cooking in the kitchen. He found Maya at the stove, making what appeared to be pancakes in elaborate shapes, while Claire and Sophie sat at the table creating detailed critiques of each creation. "That one looks like a butterfly with a broken wing," Sophie announced, pointing at Maya's latest attempt. "I was going for an elephant," Maya said with mock indignation. "Elephants don't have broken wings," Sophie pointed out logically. "Maybe this elephant is very special?" Claire suggested. "Good morning to my very special elephant family," Ryan said, pouring himself coffee and kissing the top of Sophie's head. "Daddy." Sophie launched into an excited explanation of the pancake art project, while Ryan surveyed the kitchen. Despite the flour covering most surfaces and what appeared to be batter in Maya's hair, the chaos felt domestic and warm rather than stressful. "This is very impressive," he said, studying a pancake that might have been intended as a giraffe. "Though I'm not sure I can identify all the animals in this zoo. That's because Maya's better at abstract art than representational art," Claire said, grinning at her sister. "My pancakes are conceptual," Maya replied with dignity. "They're about the feeling of animals rather than the appearance of animals." "What feeling does this one represent?" Ryan asked, pointing to a particularly blob-like creation. "Contentment," Maya said immediately. "The feeling of a very full, very happy cow lying in a sunny field." As they ate the abstract pancakes and planned their day, Ryan found himself studying the twins with growing awareness of how seamlessly they'd integrated into Sophie's life and his own. Claire's psychology coursework had given her insights into child development that she applied naturally to Sophie's needs, while Maya's artistic sensibility had brought color and creativity into routines that had become purely functional after Emma's death. But it was more than their individual contributions to the household. It was the way they'd become a unit, the 4 of them making decisions together and supporting each other through difficulties without formal discussions about responsibilities or roles. They felt like family. That realization should have been terrifying. Ryan had spent 3 years carefully constructing a life that was manageable, predictable, safe from the kind of devastating loss that had nearly destroyed him when Emma died. Letting himself care this deeply about Claire and Maya meant risking that kind of pain again. But watching Sophie laugh at Maya's pancake artistry while Claire patiently helped her cut the more elaborate shapes into manageable bites, Ryan realized it was too late for careful, emotional distance. They were already family had been for weeks now. The only question was what to do with that knowledge. After breakfast, while Maya and Sophie worked on an art project in the backyard, and Claire studied at the kitchen table, Ryan found himself doing something he hadn't done in months, making plans that extended beyond the immediate necessities of survival. He called his friend Marcus, who taught education courses at the university. "I need to ask you about graduate assistant positions for the fall semester," Ryan said when Marcus answered. "For you. Because I've been telling you for years that you should go back to school. Not for me. For someone I know who's very qualified but has some unusual financial circumstances." Ryan explained Claire's situation in carefully vague terms, focusing on her academic credentials and her desire to work with children rather than the billionaire heiress complications. "She sounds like exactly what Dr. Peterson is looking for in the childhood trauma program," Marcus said. "Have her send me her transcript and a writing sample. If she's as good as you say, there's funding available." Next, Ryan called his former colleague, Janet, who'd left community college teaching to work in arts education advocacy. "I know someone who'd be perfect for the public school art teacher fellowship program," he told her, describing Maya's background and goals. "The application deadline was last month," Janet said. "But if she's really exceptional, I might be able to get her a late consideration. Can she put together a portfolio by next week?" As Ryan made call after call, reaching out to connections he'd cultivated over years of teaching and community involvement, he realized he was doing more than helping Claire and Maya plan their futures. He was actively working to keep them in Salem, to create reasons for them to stay beyond just hiding from their mother. He was fighting for his family. That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed and the twins were reviewing their respective application materials, Claire approached Ryan in his workshop. He was sanding a rocking chair he'd been making in his spare time, the repetitive motion helping him think through the logistics of graduate school funding and teaching fellowships. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said, settling onto the stool Emma used to occupy when she'd come out to the garage to keep him company while he worked. "Of course. Why are you helping us so much? Not just letting us stay here, but actively trying to make it possible for us to build lives in Salem." Ryan set down his sandpaper and looked at her directly. "Because I want you to stay." "Why?" "Because Sophie loves you and Maya like sisters, and seeing her this happy makes me remember what our life was like before grief took over everything." He paused, then decided on complete honesty. "And because I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, surprising Ryan almost as much as they clearly surprised Claire. "Ryan," Claire said softly, "I don't know how to do this. I've never had a relationship that wasn't influenced by my mother's expectations or my family's social connections. I don't know how to love someone just because I want to, without worrying about whether it serves some larger purpose." "Then learn," Ryan said simply. "We'll figure it out together. What if my mother finds us? What if she forces me to choose between the life I want and the security of my family? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Claire, you can't live your life avoiding happiness because it might not last forever." Claire was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the warm light of the workshop. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of your mother, of this, of caring about you and Sophie more than I care about protecting myself, of building something beautiful that might get destroyed by forces outside our control." Ryan reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "I'm scared too. I never thought I'd fall in love again after Emma died. I thought Sophie and I would just exist, and that would be enough. But you and Maya didn't just move into our house. You moved into our lives. And now I can't imagine what we'd do without you." They sat together in comfortable silence, holding hands surrounded by the tools and half-finished projects that represented Ryan's attempts to create beautiful, lasting things with his own hands. "Claire," Ryan said eventually, "whatever happens with your mother, whatever complications come up, I want you to know that this is real. What we have, what we're building together, it's not just convenience or gratitude or two broken people helping each other survive. What is it then?" "It's love," Ryan said. "Messy, complicated, unexpected love that doesn't make sense on paper, but makes perfect sense in every other way." "I love you too," Claire whispered. "I love you and Sophie, and this life we've accidentally created together." When they kissed, surrounded by sawdust and the lingering scent of wood stain, it felt like sealing a promise. Not just to each other, but to the family they were choosing to become, despite all the reasons it might be impractical or impossible. 2 weeks later, both Claire and Maya received phone calls that would change everything. Claire was accepted into the graduate psychology program with a full assistantship that would cover tuition and provide a modest living stipend. Maya was awarded the competitive fellowship in arts education, which came with funding for her master's degree, plus a guaranteed teaching position in the Salem School District upon graduation. They celebrated with ice cream for dinner, a tradition Sophie insisted should mark all major life events, eating straight from the cartons while sitting on the kitchen floor, because Maya said important news should be celebrated in unusual ways. "I can't believe it worked," Maya said, looking at the fellowship letter for the dozenth time. "It worked because you're both extraordinary," Ryan said, "but also because you were brave enough to bet on yourselves when everyone else wanted to make your choices for you." "Does this mean you're really staying?" Sophie asked, looking back and forth between the twins. "Like staying forever?" "It means we're staying through graduate school," Claire said carefully. "Maya and I will both be here for at least 2 more years, and after that we'll see what makes sense for everyone." But Sophie's direct question had highlighted something they'd all been avoiding discussing directly: what exactly they were building together and how permanent they intended it to be. That night, after Sophie was asleep, and Maya was in her room working on fellowship application materials, Ryan and Claire sat on the front porch swing Emma had insisted they install during their first spring in the house. The air was warm for April, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and the promise of summer. 2 years, Ryan said quietly. "At least 2 years, Claire corrected. "Are we going to spend that time figuring out whether this could work long-term, or are we going to spend it pretending we're not building something permanent?" Claire was quiet for a moment, her hand resting in his. "I want to build something permanent," she said finally. "But Ryan, you have to understand what that could mean. My mother isn't going to give up. She's been looking for Maya and me for 4 months now, and she has resources most people can't imagine. Eventually she's going to find us. And when she does, I don't know. But she's not going to make it easy for me to choose this life over the one she's planned for me." Ryan thought about Victoria Cross, the woman in the newspaper photograph with sharp eyes and calculating expression, someone accustomed to controlling billion-dollar business decisions and family members with equal efficiency. What would convince her to let you go? Proof that I can be happy and successful without her management. Evidence that you and Sophie aren't just a phase or a rebellion, but the foundation of the life I actually want. Then that's what we'll show her, Ryan said. We'll build something so solid, so obviously right, that even someone who needs to control everything will be able to see that some things are worth leaving alone. Claire leaned against his shoulder, and they swung gently in the evening air, listening to the sounds of their neighborhood settling into night. Dogs barking in distant yards, the soft hum of air conditioning units, the occasional car passing on Maple Street. "I used to think freedom meant not being accountable to anyone," Claire said softly. just going wherever I wanted and doing whatever felt right without considering other people's needs or expectations. What do you think now? Now I think freedom means being able to choose your own responsibilities, deciding who you want to be accountable to and why. She tilted her head to look at him. I want to be accountable to you and Sophie. I want to choose this family every day, not because I have to, but because it's where I belong. 2 months later, on a Tuesday morning in early June, Ryan's phone rang while he was drinking coffee and watching Sophie build an elaborate tower out of blocks, while Claire and Maya made breakfast together, with the easy coordination of people who'd perfected their shared routines. The number was local, but unfamiliar. Hello, this is Ryan Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, this is Detective Sarah Hoffman with the Salem Police Department. I understand you have Claire and Maya Cross living in your home. Ryan's blood turned to ice. He walked into the living room, away from the kitchen, and spoke quietly. What can I help you with, Detective? Their mother has been in contact with our department. She's flying in this afternoon and would like to arrange a meeting. She's requested that we facilitate the initial contact to ensure everyone's safety and comfort. Has she filed any kind of complaint or charges? No, sir. This appears to be a family matter. But Mrs. Cross has asked that we help arrange a meeting at a neutral location. Would that be possible this afternoon? Ryan looked back toward the kitchen, where Claire was laughing at something Maya had said, while Sophie provided running commentary on whatever they were cooking. His family going about their Tuesday morning routine, unaware that their carefully constructed new life was about to be tested in ways they'd hoped to avoid for much longer. Let me speak with Claire. And Maya, Ryan said. I'll call you back within the hour. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Mitchell. Mrs. Cross has specifically requested that this meeting remain civilized and that everyone involved be treated with respect. She wants to resolve this situation without involving media attention or legal complications. After hanging up, Ryan stood in his living room for a moment, trying to figure out how to tell 3 people he loved that their sanctuary was about to be invaded by the world they'd been hiding from. Claire noticed immediately when he returned to the kitchen. His face gave everything away. What happened? She asked, setting down the spatula she'd been using to flip eggs. Your mother found us, Ryan said simply. She's flying in today. She wants to meet this afternoon. Maya went completely still. Sophie looked up from her blocks with interest, but no alarm, unaware that anything significant had been announced. Detective Hoffman called Ryan continued. Your mother contacted the police to help facilitate a meeting. She's requested neutral ground and assured them this is a family discussion, not a legal matter. Claire sank into a kitchen chair, her face pale. 4 months. We made it 4 months. What do we do? Maya asked. We meet with her, Claire said quietly. Running again isn't sustainable, and she's obviously not going to stop looking for us. Are you sure? Ryan asked. Because we can figure out other options if you're not ready. Claire looked around the kitchen, taking in the evidence of the life they'd built. Sophie's artwork on the refrigerator coffee mugs they'd each claimed as their own, the comfortable chaos of people who'd learned to share space without losing themselves. I'm ready, she said. We've proven we can build something real. Now we find out whether she's willing to let us keep it. That afternoon, the 4 of them drove to the Salem Community Center, where Detective Hoffman had arranged for them to use a private conference room. Ryan held Claire's hand in the car, while Maya sat in the back seat with Sophie, all of them quiet with nervous anticipation. Sophie had been told that Claire and Maya's mother was coming to visit, that this was an important conversation, but not something for her to worry about. She was excited about meeting someone new, unaware of the tension filling the car. Detective Hoffman met them at the entrance, a calm woman in her 40s, who clearly had experience managing delicate family situations. Mrs. Cross arrived about 10 minutes ago, she explained, as she led them through the building. She's requested that the initial meeting be just her and the twins, but I understand you all consider yourselves a family unit. We are a family. Ryan said firmly. We'll respect Mrs. Cross's desire to speak with her daughters, but Sophie and I aren't leaving the building. Understood. There's a family area just outside the conference room where you can wait comfortably. They reached the conference room, and through the glass doors, Ryan caught his first glimpse of Victoria Cross in person. She was smaller than he'd expected, elegantly dressed in a way that suggested enormous wealth, but perfectly controlled, sitting at the conference table, with her hands folded and her expression carefully composed. She looked like a woman accustomed to managing difficult negotiations. Claire squeezed Ryan's hand once before letting go. "We'll be okay," she said quietly. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." After Ryan and Sophie settled in the waiting area, Claire and Maya entered the conference room to face their mother for the first time in 4 months. Victoria Cross stood when her daughters entered, her composure cracking slightly as she took in their appearances. Both twins looked healthy, happy, more relaxed than Victoria had seen them in years. But they also looked independent, in a way that had nothing to do with money or family connections. "Claire, Maya," Victoria said softly. "You both look well." "Hello, Mother," Claire said, her voice carefully controlled. They sat across from each other at the polished conference table, 2 generations of strong women who'd hurt each other in the name of love. "I've been looking for you since December," Victoria said. "Do you have any idea how worried I've been?" "We've been safe," Maya said quietly. "We've been taking care of ourselves, living in your car for weeks, then moving in with a complete stranger. That's your definition of taking care of yourselves." "Ryan isn't a stranger," Claire said firmly. "He's the best man I've ever known, and he's become family to both of us." Victoria's expression tightened. "Claire, you've known him for 4 months. That's not enough time to make the kind of commitments you seem to be suggesting. It's enough time to know that he loves me for who I am, not for what I can provide for his business interests or social status." The reference to Preston Whitmore hung in the air between them. "That engagement was about your future security," Victoria said. "Preston comes from a good family, has an established career, shares our social connections. He would have provided stability. He would have provided control," Claire corrected. "His stability and your approval in exchange for my autonomy and happiness." Victoria was quiet for a moment, studying her daughters' faces. "Are you happy?" she asked finally. "Yes," Maya said immediately. "Happier than we've been in years." "We're finishing our undergraduate degrees next week," Claire said. "We've both been accepted to graduate programs here in Salem. Maya has a fellowship to study art education. I have an assistantship in clinical psychology. We're building careers based on our own interests and abilities. And you're supporting yourselves how? We have jobs. We pay rent. We budget carefully and make responsible choices about money." "Ryan's money," Victoria guessed. "Our money," Maya said. "We contribute to the household expenses and maintain our own financial independence." Victoria absorbed this information clearly, reassessing her assumptions about their living situation. "I'd like to meet this man who's become so important to your lives. His name is Ryan Mitchell," Claire said. "He's a widower with a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie. He teaches woodworking at the community college. He's kind, patient, intelligent, and he loves me without trying to change or manage me. And you love him very much." Victoria called Detective Hoffman back into the room and requested that Ryan be invited to join the conversation. When Ryan entered carrying Sophie, because she'd fallen asleep in the waiting area, Victoria Cross got her first look at the man her daughter had chosen over a life of wealth and social prominence. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of work done with skill and care. He held his sleeping daughter with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to managing parenting responsibilities alone. His clothes were clean and well-maintained, but clearly not expensive. "Mr. Mitchell," Victoria said, standing to shake his hand while Sophie dozed against his shoulder. "Mrs. Cross," Ryan replied, his voice steady, despite the obvious stress of the situation. "I understand my daughters have been living in your home." "Yes, ma'am. They've been wonderful housemates and Sophie adores them. And you're aware of their actual family circumstances. I am now. Though when they first moved in, I just knew they were two young women who needed a safe place to stay while they finished school." Victoria studied him carefully, looking for signs of opportunism or calculation. "Are you familiar with the extent of their trust funds?" "Mr. Mitchell? I know they come from a wealthy family," Ryan said. "But Mrs. Cross, I need you to understand something. I fell in love with Claire before I knew anything about your money. I fell in love with her kindness, her intelligence, the way she helps my daughter with homework and makes our house feel like a home again. How convenient for you." Ryan's expression hardened slightly. "If you think I'm with Claire for financial reasons, you're welcome to investigate my character as thoroughly as you'd like. You'll find that I work hard to support my family, I pay my bills on time, and I've never asked your daughters for anything except honesty and the chance to love them both as they deserve to be loved." Victoria was quiet for a moment, absorbing the direct challenge to her assumptions. Sophie stirred in Ryan's arms, waking up slowly, and looking around with the disorientation of a child awakening in an unfamiliar place. "Daddy," she mumbled. "I'm right here, sweetheart. This is Claire and Maya's mother, Mrs. Cross." Sophie turned to study Victoria with the frank curiosity of a 6-year-old. "Are you here to take Claire and Maya away?" she asked directly. Victoria blinked clearly, not prepared for such straightforward questioning from a child. "I'm here to talk with them about their future," Victoria said carefully. "They don't want to live with you anymore," Sophie informed her matter-of-factly. "They want to live with us because we're a family, and families stay together." Sophie's simple statement contained more truth than hours of adult negotiation had managed to establish. Victoria looked at her daughters, both sitting beside the man they'd chosen, both clearly prepared to defend their decisions despite the emotional cost of opposing her. Then she looked at Sophie, the confident little girl who spoke about family with the certainty of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Finally, she looked at Ryan, whose steady presence had clearly provided stability for 3 people who'd needed it desperately. "I'd like to see where they've been living," Victoria said finally. "I'd like to understand what they've built that's more appealing than the security I can provide." "Of course," Ryan said. "You're welcome in our home." An hour later, Victoria Cross stood in Ryan Mitchell's modest kitchen, watching her daughters move around the space with the unconscious coordination of people who belonged there. Claire was making tea while Maya helped Sophie set the table. All 3 of them chattering about their day with easy affection. The house was nothing like the homes Victoria had provided for her daughters. It was small, clearly old, furnished with pieces that had been chosen for function rather than style. But it was warm, lived in, filled with the kind of comfortable chaos that suggested people who enjoyed each other's company. Sophie took her role as hostess very seriously, showing Victoria her artwork on the refrigerator and explaining the elaborate mythology behind each drawing. "This is a picture of our whole family," Sophie said, pointing to a crayon drawing that showed 5 stick figures holding hands in front of a house. "That's Daddy, and that's me, and that's Claire, and that's Maya, and that's Mommy, Emma, watching us from heaven." Victoria studied the drawing, noting that Claire and Maya had been included as permanent members of the family constellation. "Your mummy died?" Victoria asked gently. "When I was 3, Sophie said matter-of-factly. "But it's okay, because Daddy takes really good care of me, and now Claire and Maya help too. Claire braids my hair better than Daddy, and Maya teaches me about colors, and they both tell really good bedtime stories." "That sounds wonderful." "It is wonderful," Sophie agreed. "Do you want to see my room? I have a dinosaur collection." As Sophie led Victoria on an enthusiastic tour of the house, Claire and Maya cleaned up in the kitchen while Ryan worked on preparing dinner. "She's not what I expected," Maya said quietly. "What did you expect?" "More coldness," Claire admitted. "More obvious anger. She seems genuinely surprised that we're happy here. She's seeing us differently than she's ever seen us before, Ryan observed. As adults making our own choices rather than children who need her protection. Do you think that's enough? Maya asked. Do you think she'll let us stay? Before anyone could answer, Victoria returned to the kitchen with Sophie, who was still providing detailed explanations of dinosaur classification systems. Mr. Mitchell, Victoria said, "Could I speak with you privately for a few minutes?" They stepped onto the back porch where the apple and cherry trees were beginning to show the first signs of summer fruit development. Victoria looked around the modest backyard, taking in the vegetable garden Maya had helped Sophie plant, and the workshop where Ryan spent his evenings creating beautiful things with his hands. "Your daughter is remarkable," Victoria said. "Thank you. She's the best thing in my life. She clearly adores Claire and Maya. They've been wonderful with her. Better than wonderful. They've helped her heal from losing her mother in ways I couldn't manage alone." Victoria was quiet for a moment, studying the man who'd become so important to her daughters. "I need to ask you something directly, Mr. Mitchell. What are your intentions toward Claire? I intend to love her for as long as she'll let me. I intend to support her dreams and help her build the kind of life that makes her happy. And if she's willing, I intend to marry her and spend the rest of my life proving that she made the right choice." Victoria absorbed this declaration with surprise. It had been delivered without hesitation or calculation, with the simple honesty of someone stating an obvious fact. "You've thought about marriage every day since I realized I was in love with her. And Maya, what role do you see her playing in this future? You're planning? Maya is Claire's sister and Sophie's chosen aunt. She's part of our family permanently, regardless of what happens between Claire and me romantically." Victoria nodded slowly. She'd spent 4 months imagining her daughters living in dangerous conditions, being taken advantage of by people who saw their wealth as an opportunity. Instead, she'd found them in a home where they were loved for exactly who they were, where they contributed meaningfully to a family that had embraced them completely. "Mr. Mitchell, I owe you an apology. I assumed the worst about your motives without knowing anything about your character. You were protecting your daughters," Ryan said. "I understand that impulse. I was trying to control them," Victoria corrected. "There's a difference, though. It's taken me too long to see it." They went back inside to find Claire, Maya, and Sophie working together on dinner preparation with the easy teamwork that had developed over months of shared routines. Victoria watched her daughters in this domestic setting, noting how relaxed they seemed, how naturally they'd integrated into this family structure. Claire was laughing at something Sophie had said, while Maya added artistic flourishes to their simple salad presentation. "Girls," Victoria said, interrupting their conversation, "I'd like to talk with you both again." They gathered in the living room, Sophie curled up next to Claire on the couch, while Maya sat cross-legged on the floor and Ryan settled into his favorite chair. Victoria remained standing, clearly preparing to make some kind of formal statement. "For the past 4 months, I've been operating under the assumption that you'd made a mistake, that you'd eventually realize the life I'd planned for you was better than whatever you thought you could build on your own." She paused, looking around the room at the evidence of their chosen life. "I was wrong. You haven't made a mistake. You've made a choice, a good choice about the kind of life you want and the kind of family you want to be part of." Claire reached for Ryan's hand, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I'm not going to force you to come home," Victoria continued. "I'm not going to pressure you about the engagement or threaten your financial independence. You're adults and you've proven you can take care of yourselves and contribute meaningfully to other people's lives." "Thank you," Maya whispered. "But I do have some requests." Victoria sat down for the first time since entering the house, her formal posture softening slightly. "I'd like to be part of your lives going forward, not controlling, not managing, just present. I've missed too much already because I was so focused on protecting your futures that I forgot to enjoy your present? You want to be part of our lives here, Claire? Asked carefully. If you'll have me. I'd like to visit regularly. Get to know Sophie. Watch you both succeed in graduate school. I'd like to try being a mother instead of a CEO when it comes to our relationship. Sophie perked up with interest. Does that mean you're going to be like a grandma? Because I don't have any grandmas, and that would be really nice. Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. Tears spilled down her face as she looked at this little girl who was offering her a place in their family with the generous acceptance that only children possessed. I would be honored to be your grandma, Sophie Victoria said through her tears. What about Preston? Maya asked. What about the business arrangements? I'll handle Preston and the board, Victoria said firmly. The engagement is cancelled permanently. Any business decisions will be made based on sound financial planning, not family obligations. She turned to Ryan. Mr. Mitchell, I hope you understand what an extraordinary family you've taken responsibility for. I'm the lucky one, Ryan said simply. They chose me as much as I chose them. 6 months later, on a crisp October afternoon, Ryan knelt in his backyard beside the cherry tree Emma had planted during their first spring in the house. Claire stood in front of him wearing a simple white dress that Maya had helped her choose, while Sophie scattered flower petals around them with the serious concentration of a flower girl who took her responsibilities very seriously. Victoria sat in the front row of folding chairs they'd arranged for their small wedding ceremony, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while Maya stood beside Claire as maid of honor. It wasn't the elaborate society wedding Victoria could have arranged, but it was exactly what Claire and Ryan wanted: intimate, genuine, surrounded by people who'd supported their love story from the beginning. Pastor Jennifer, who'd married Emma and Ryan in this same spot 8 years earlier, smiled as she began the ceremony. We are gathered today to celebrate the union of two people who found each other when they both needed healing, who built a family based on choice rather than chance, who proved that love really is patient, love is kind, and love never fails. Ryan's vows were simple and heartfelt. Claire, you taught me that it's possible to love again after loss, that families can be created in unexpected ways, that sometimes the best futures are the ones you never planned. I promise to love you and Sophie and Maya as the family we've chosen to become. Claire's vows made everyone cry, including Victoria. Ryan, you gave me a home when I was lost, a family when I was alone, and the courage to choose happiness over security. I promise to choose you every day, to choose this family every day for all the days we have together. When Pastor Jennifer pronounced them husband and wife, Sophie cheered so loudly that the neighbors came out to see what the celebration was about. Maya threw biodegradable confetti made from rose petals. Victoria cried openly, no longer caring about maintaining her composed public image. The reception was held in their backyard with food from Ryan's favorite local restaurant and a playlist of songs that meant something to their family. Victoria gave a toast that surprised everyone, including herself. 6 months ago, I thought I was protecting my daughters by controlling their choices. They taught me that real protection comes from loving someone enough to let them find their own happiness. Ryan, thank you for loving my girls the way they deserve to be loved. Sophie, thank you for teaching me that families are built by choice, not blood. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, the newlyweds found themselves alone on their back porch with Sophie, who'd been allowed to stay up late for the special occasion. Mrs. Mitchell Ryan said, testing out Claire's new name. I like the sound of that, Claire agreed, settling into his arms, while Sophie dozed against her shoulder. Are we going to have more kids? Sophie asked sleepily. Because I think babies would like our family. Claire and Ryan exchanged a look over Sophie's head. Would you like a little brother or sister someday? Claire asked gently. Only if they like dinosaurs, Sophie said seriously. And only if Maya teaches them about colors, and you teach them about feelings, and Daddy teaches them about making beautiful things. That sounds like a pretty good plan to me, Ryan said, kissing both his girls. As they sat together on the porch swing, Emma had insisted they install during their first spring in the house, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd built from broken pieces and brave choices. Claire thought about the night she and Maya had slept in their car in a grocery store parking lot, wondering if they'd made a terrible mistake by running away from everything they'd ever known. Now she knew the truth. Sometimes the best stories begin with the courage to leave everything familiar behind. Sometimes love finds you when you're brave enough to choose hope over security. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the family you create is even more beautiful than the one you were born into. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we'd love for you to let us know by hitting that like button below. Your support means everything to us and helps us bring more heartwarming stories to families everywhere. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about love, second chances, and the courage it takes to choose happiness over security. And please share this story with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to start over, that families come in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the most broken moments create the most beautiful beginnings. Thanks for joining us for this journey, and remember, you're never too old to run toward love, and you're never too young to know what happiness feels like. Until next time, keep choosing love over fear, hope over doubt, and family over everything else.